Hi guys, this is Sparky Axon here, and this video is about the Workflow plugin for DFHack. This plugin is going to help you automate the production of various things inside your Dwarf Fortress so that you always have the right amount of whatever it is that you need. To make this easier to understand, I prepared a small example. I have an embark here. Nothing really happened so far. Hold on a second, just need to turn down this sound a bit. Okay, so in this embark, like I said, nothing really happened other than me building a small below ground room right here, where I also created a stockpile for beds, one for wood, and a carpenter here. And I mean the idea is to exemplify how Workflow works for beds, because it's not the most useful for beds, but it's very easy to visually track what's going on for beds, because they're like one tile, one bed, instead of drinks, for example, which go inside a barrel and so on. So let's say you want to build beds. Typical way would be you just queue them up, but that has a problem. As you place them later on, you have to keep queuing up orders, and also if you want to queue up without the manager more than 20, it's gonna be impossible to do so. You have to queue up like 10 and then come back and queue up 10 more, and you might miss that moment where when you to refresh the order because you're doing something else. And as things like this add up, as your fortress grows, you need to track beds and doors and tables and chairs and all this stuff, so it becomes harder and harder to just go queue things up, and even using a manager can be complicated, even if that is if you have a manager at all. So what Workflow does is it allows you to first set up an order for one bed. In this case, it requires that you set it up on repeat, which normally would create a lot of beds unless you stopped it manually. But then what Workflow will do is it will suspend this repeat order and unsuspend it based on a range that you give him. So you say I want to have beds no less than 1 and no more than 2, for example, and it's going to suspend the order when you reach 3 beds because you've got over your high limit, and it's going to unsuspend it once forever for any reason you go below, not below, but once you reach the low limit of 1, right? And obviously you would the number of beds you have available will go down as you place them. So this will automatically kick the production up to keep up with you placing them, and will stop it once you reach the number of beds you want to have in reserve, so to speak. So let's see how that goes. If you once you have queued this up, like I said, this is a requirement. Queue it up, one bed, put it on repeat. Then hit escape to get the main menu. Hit Z and then hit Alt W. For Alt W there is no indication here on the screen, so I repeat, you hit Alt W and you get to this UI, which is the UI for the Workflow plugin. As you can see, I have lots of rules here that are kind of my rules for my other fortresses that I'm playing. Just ignore them. So we'll set up a new rule like we didn't have one already for beds. We have to click or type Shift A to add a new rule, and then we just hit T to select beds. This is a rule about beds, and we hit the down arrow so that we select the material class here. This is not really necessary because beds can only be made out of wood, but just giving an example. And then we select the range by hitting Shift R. It's written down here. And like I said, let's tell Workflow to produce beds so that the number of beds stays between 1 and 2. Once we're done here, everything is set, like the type of item, the material, and the range is set. You hit Y to add or update the rule, and here it is, the rule. It says here we have 0 beds, and we set up a limit. We set up a limit of 2. We are done here. We hit Escape, and then we watch it in action. You should see the carpenter coming and starting the production because we had that order on repeat. And once we hit 3 beds, once he's done building his third bed, Workflow will notice we have more than the high limit, which was 2, and will suspend that order so that no more beds are produced until the quantity of available beds in the stockpile decreases because we placed them. So here is the third bed, and you can see now the construct bed order is suspended, so no more beds are produced unless we place more beds. But please notice, if we place just one bed, nothing's going to happen because the number of available beds is still going to be within that range. It's going to be 2, right? So only if we place a second bed, then we reach the low limit of 1 available beds, and the production will resume. Okay, here is the carpenter, which who came to the carpenter's workshop to resume production, because now this build order is unsuspended, is resumed by Workflow automatically. And this is the basic concept, and it works the same for pretty much anything. But it's particularly useful, even though it's not so easy to spot how it works for drinks. You can say drinks of any type, just build them and say 150 to 200, whatever. Or you can use it for meals, any prepared meal of any material. Let's take an example where you would select the material, because you can select the material class here, or you can be very specific and select a specific material. Like, let's say you want to build helms and you want to build them all out of iron. You're not gonna see iron here, even if you type iron. There is no matching because it's inside this folder here, inorganic. So you just pick iron and say I want between 5 and 10 iron helms, right? The way that's gonna work is gonna build 11, and then as dwarves who have iron helms assigned as their uniforms come pick that up from the stockpile, the number of available iron helms is gonna decrease, so automatically the production will resume. That's actually the only one catch you have to remember when using this. It's not enough if you specify a rule here. That's not going to automatically start some production. It will only unsuspend some construction order that you have already placed for one or more specific workshops, like this one. So if you don't have any order here, defining a rule for beds is not going to create a workshop or create a build order inside an existing workshop. You have to do this first. And you also have to have the materials, obviously. And the dwarves have to have the labors enabled to, in this case, carpentry, to build beds or whatever it is. Also, if you were to set a rule, for example, so let's say you set that rule about iron helms and you have no iron, but you're building other types of helms, this rule will not limit how much other types of helms are produced. You could be building them forever, so you have to watch out. But you know, the concept should be pretty obvious by now. You can use it to automate a lot of the stuff that you would normally have to keep track of in a larger fortress, like beds, doors, hatches, leather helms, iron greaves, steel trap components, whatever. It really allows you to focus on the fun rather than having to micromanage tens, if not hundreds, of individual components being produced in the right quantities and then produced again in the right quantities once they're used, and so on. For example, for bolts, it's really, really useful. If you build something like you can queue up something like bolts and say you want them out of bone, and that's gonna automatically suspend the production order for bone bolts once they reach, I don't know, 200, right? So they get automatically produced and don't have to worry about it. Your stockpile is gonna always be full but not overflowing, which is just great. I hope you find this useful, and if you have any more tips in connection to using Worfklow, feel free to comment. If you have any more ideas about what you'd like me to cover in a future video about Dwarf Fortress, or tips and tricks about how to use various plugins from based on DFHack, please let me know. Until then, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.